Salvete omnes! Welcome back to our second Vesuvius letter from Pliny the Younger. We're going to be wrapping up the letter today, starting on line 54. So we might remember from last time that Pliny and his mother finally decided to leave the house, and they ventured out into the panicked crowd in the darkness of Misenum, where the ash cloud has finally reached them. So at this point, paulum, we might remember that's our adverb form of parvus, meaning a little. And what did it do a little bit? It reluxit. It got light again. So got a little light again. And he's going to explain this situation with our neuter quod, which here referring to the whole situation. Quod videbatur, which seemed, you might remember, a passive of video is often best translated as seem, which seemed non dies, right? Seemed to be not day, or not daylight for us, a dative, but what did it seem to be? An indicium, that neuter noun, an indication of, with our genitive here, of a fire that is adventans. So a form of ad plus venio, we just have the frequentative form, so approaching. So it seemed an indication of an approaching fire. So it's not a nice sky getting light, it's a scary fire sky getting light. Et ignis quidem, and indeed this ignis, this fire, substitit, it kind of kept standing there, or it stood firm. Longius. We see what's another comparative adverb. So longer, for a longer time, for a rather long time. So first the fire's there for a while, and then we're going to have a couple more nominative nouns. We probably have to put in erat or errant, depending for singular or plural. So there was tenebrae, shadows again, with Russus, and keenis, ash again. And this ash is described by our two masculine nominative singular adjectives, much and heavy. All right, so we have fire, then darkness, then more ash falling. And while this is going on, excutiebamus. See that imperfect tense of a we subject? We were shaking off. Percutio, like percussion is to strike, so excutio, similar idea. And we were shaking off what? Our accusative object, hunk. We were shaking this off. Noticing that this hunk is also going to refer back to the keenness, masculine singular. So we were shaking ash off. Identidem, we see the repetition in there, shows that means again and again. And we were doing this a surgentes. He's talking about him and his mom surging up or standing up. So the idea is that they're getting slowly covered with ash and they have to stand up periodically to shake it off. And he goes a little further to say what would have happened in an alius situation otherwise, alioqui. And if we go to essemus, it's a form of to be in the imperfect subjunctive, which is going to show some sort of contrary to fact what might have happened. So otherwise, we would have been, or we would be operti. That's covered. Opposite of aperti with an A, that would be opened up. This is closed or covered. So we would have been covered up. Atque etiam, and even oblisi. That's means kind of crushed or pressed down, crushed by the pondus, by the weight. Notice that's a third declension pondus ponderis. So it looks a little like an infinitive, but it's actually a noun. All right, so we have to shake the ash off so they don't get crushed by it. Now we're going to have some lovely subjunctive clauses showing some sort of hypothetical or condition. And we have posem, another imperfect subjunctive. So he's talking that I would be able, No, but the implication is he's not. So I would be able to do what? To gloriare, to make glorious boasts. So what would he be able to brag about? Brag about that. So we're going to enter an indirect statement where we will want our accusative subject and infinitive verb. So that a gemitum or vocem, those are both subjects. We have non gemitum, non vocem, a bit of a correlation here with no conjunction. So an example of a syndeton again. And he would brag that those things didn't excidise, had not fallen from cado cadere, had not fallen out. All right, so I would be able to brag that not a groan, a gemitum, fell out, nor a voice that is parum fortem, parum being the comparative of paulum, too little brave. So those things fell out from me. A dative here with a compound verb, ex plus cado. So he could have bragged that he didn't make a groan or any sort of, under brave vocalization in Petantes Pericles in such dangers. So he wasn't being a crybaby about it. But this is a contrary to fact condition. I would be able to brag about that. Nisi, if not, so if something were not true. And we're going to have to look for our subjunctive verb to complete this condition, and it's all the way at credidisem. But this one, it's not another imperfect, it's a pluperfect subjunctive. So if I would be able to do this if this had not happened. And so what past contrary to fact condition had not happened? If I had not believed, so at the time, he's not talking about now, in the event, if I had not believed that may, subject of an indirect statement, that may perire, that I was perishing, was dying, that I was perishing cum omnibus, along with everything. And here we're going to have a parallel structure that omnia me cum perire, that everything was perishing with me. Another example of a syndeton, and you could say that this is perhaps a synchesis word order where we have the A, then the B, the A, then the B, as opposed to a chiastic word order. And certainly an intentional antithesis or parallelism. Then again, you could argue that the mays are the A's and the omnias are the B's, and maybe it is chiastic. Clearly a intentional parallelism in structure. So he shouldn't be praised for not whining about the situation, because he just thought that himself and everything around him was dying. And this being a solacium, a solace or consolation, Steadman's commentary suggests this is a dative. Perhaps it's saying, this happened as a consolation, or it might even be a dative going with credo, which usually takes the dative. So I believed in what kind of consolation? A misero, a sad, however magno, however big. So this was a sad consolation, but a great one, a consolation of mortalitas, of his mortality. In English, I think the idiom would be better, consolation for his mortality. So at least it made him feel a little better that the entire world seemed to be ending at the time, so he wasn't so sad about himself. Tough times. All right, tandem, finally. Illa, what's the feminine thing, that thing? It's the caligo. It's another third declension that might not look nominative at first. That mist or that cloud being tenuata, having been made tenuis or thin, so thinned out, it discessit. It departed, quasi as if in fumum we nebulam, as if into smoke or a mist. Notice that we works just like a que. Que is and, we is or. Remember that like well. All right, so the darkness, the misty cloud has finally departed, faded away into wisps of smoke. And soon, dies veros. No verb again, we have to add that was. Erat soon, it was a true day. And the sol, the sun, even a fulcit. The sun even gleamed or shone out. However, it was luridus, kind of yellowy, uh, and or not fully strong. So it was a kind of yellow sun, qualis, just like a sun solet. Sun is accustomed esse to be. So under what situation do you get this strange yellowy light? It's accustomed to happen. Now we have a cum clause that explains the condition. When it deficit, when it is lacking or failing. Here we have to take the sol as the implied subject of all these verbs. And what does it mean that the sun is failing or lacking? That's referring to an eclipse. And in Latin, the terms for eclipses are usually some form of this de plus facio, like a defectus, failing of the sun, or a defectio. So it seemed like an eclipse, and if anyone has experienced an eclipse, you might be able to relate to that strange twilight that feels surreal and not quite natural, or at least not quite common. All right, so our next verb is occursavant. Some plural things were kind of running around or were meeting something. Our compounds of ob plus kuro often have something to do with meeting or getting in the way of. And our subject here is going to be our neuter plural omnia. So everything was kind of running up to meet or was getting in the way of with a dative object. The oculis, the eyes, object here, which were adhuc, still, to this point, trepidans, still trembling. And all things mutata, having been changed. So it's perhaps a strange phrasing in English, but all things having been changed were meeting our still trembling eyes. So we saw everything looking different. And these all things were obducta, kind of led, here's something that's led kind of over in front of, and here that's meaning to cover. So everything was covered with alto cinere. Remember, altus can be high or deep. Here we want to say with deep ash. Tomquam, as if, just like niue, just like snow. So it looks like there is a thick layer of snow over everything from the ash. That brings us to our last paragraph of the letter. Let's see what Pliny and his mother do. As a reminder, continually described here by a masculine plural adjectives because it's a group of mixed gender, and Latin usually defaults to the masculine. So regressi, having regressed, having gone back to Misenum. Notice the accusative showing to a place without a preposition if it's a city. Having returned to Misenum, we'll go all the way down to ex aegimos. We agoed, we kind of did, or we spent, since we're going to talk about some time, we spent a night. What kind of night? A night that was suspensam and dubiam, connected by the quay. Uh, causing suspense means you're having hung in there, so a suspended and doubtful night. Doubtful with two things, with spe and metu, with hope and fear. And we did this with a certain condition having taken place. That's an ablative absolute. with our corporibus, with our bodies having been curatis, cared for, utcumque kind of, all the way, or here, as, I guess it's as needed or as possible, in whatever way. So they took care of themselves, treated their injuries, and spent a very fearful and hopeful night. But we find out that metus, fear, praevalebat. If we turn this into English, prevail comes from this. Fear was stronger. Fear prevailed. And now we get nam, our logical connector, is going to explain why. For at something, we're going to have a both this was true, and this was true, all explaining why fear was the stronger. For the tremor terrae, the shaking of the earth, perseverabat. We can see persevere in that, was persevering, was continuing. And plerique, very many people who are lymphati. They are lymphatic, which we won't get into the details of ancient views on the bodily humors and the changes in temperament they caused, but this is referring to kind of hysterical and frantic. So very many frantic people, ludificabantur. Well, we see the facio, they were making something. And what were they making? Ludus, games. So they were making games of, as in mocking, making fun of, another et, both something and something, et sua et aliena mala. So they're making fun of mala, bad things, both their own and of other people, like alius. And how are they making fun of everyone's misfortunes? With terrificis. Here, not terrific, but actually terror facio, terrifying. Vaticinationibus. This comes from our Latin noun a vates, which is a prophet, someone who seeks the future. So these are foretellings or predictions. So some people, I guess, are driven to hysteria and they're perhaps making light of a situation or predicting terrible end of the world situations. However, Tamen, we have for us. So Pliny's saying himself and his mother aren't in that same boat. For us, ne tunc quidem. You might remember tunc is then, and this ne quidem is a phrase that usually sandwiches the word it's emphasizing. It means not even. So not even then. And let's jump ahead a little bit to concilio. So for us, there was a erat, there was a concilium abeundi, a plan of doing something. That's a gerund. So a plan for doing what? Ob plus ao, of going away. So there was a plan for going away when? Not even then. We're not going to leave. Quam, although, and these participles are going to describe the nobis, so they're also dative plural. Although we both expertis, having experienced periculum, danger, et expectantibus, and expecting another implied danger. So although we experienced and were expecting all this danger, not even then did we plan to leave. Why? Well, donec here, that's an until a certain condition is met, until there was, at our erat again, until there was a nuntius, was news or a message about my uncle. So we're not going to depart Misenum without hearing the news of Pliny the Elder. And as we know from the earlier letter, that was unfortunate news that he did not survive the eruption. And that's going to end the actual narrative of what happened. So that's all he tells us about the events, and now he's going to wrap up his letter with a little, kind of framing content for Tacitus, the historian he's writing to. And let's jump to our first verb, leges. Something about you reading, and notice that ace ending, this is a future tense with those ham and eggs endings for the third conjugation. You will read. Uh, and you will read what are neuter plural hike, these things. And you will read it being non scriptures. Let's talk about Tacitus, not about to write. And why is he reading these things but not going to write about them? Because these things, they are nequaquam, not at all, digna, worthy of something. That's where we get dignity. And worthy in Latin, dignus always goes with an ablative. We say worthy of in English, in Latin it's more worthy with. And what are they not worthy of? Historia. That's the object of dignus. So as he caveated his letter at the beginning, he thinks this story is not nearly as important as his illustrious uncle's and probably shouldn't make it into the history books. It's just his personal narrative. So you can read this unworthy story, Tacitus, et imputabis. Another future, you will impute, you'll attribute something, and basically you will kind of impute some value for yourself. Ski licet, that's kind of course, I believe it comes from scire plus licet. It's allowed to know, but basically it's means certainly. So you will certainly, uh, decide for yourself. You, qui, he's explaining you who did something, who requisisti, who requested it. So Pliny, who's being very humble about this letter, says, it's your fault for asking, and you will assign what what's he going to impute? That's going to be the answer to this condition. If videbuntur, if they will seem, and here we're still talking about the hike, if these things will seem digna, worthy. And we wrap up with one last ne quidem, not even. So if they will seem worthy, not even, with our ablative again, of a letter. So Tacitus, it's your fault for asking about such trifling things that you might even judge that they're not even worthy writing a letter about them. Now, do we think that Pliny and Tacitus actually thought these things were so unworthy and boring? We still read these stories. It's a first-hand account of this crazy natural disaster. I think Pliny probably knew he had a fairly interesting story on his hands too, but you can make up your mind why he takes such a humble tone to his literary friend. And we'll wrap up with Wale. Goodbye for our letter. Goodbye, Tacitus, and goodbye, all of you. Take care.